Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it. Then let's evaluate together. The Atlanta skyline glittered like a sea of stars through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Miles Carter's penthouse, casting a soft glow across the hardwood floors. Jada Brooks stood in the middle of the sprawling living room, her bare feet sinking into a rug that probably cost more than her mama's house back in Shiloh, Georgia. The air smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne, a world away from the cornbread and gospel hymns she grew up on. Her heart thumped hard against her ribs, but her face stayed calm. Years of proving herself in rooms where she was the only black woman had taught her how to hide the nerves. Miles stood a few feet away, hands shoved into the pockets of his tailored slacks, his sharp blue eyes locked on her. He was all angles and confidence. Dark hair slicked back just right, a jawline that could cut glass, and a presence that screamed money and power, the kind of man who walked into a room and owned it without trying. But tonight, something was off. His usual swagger faltered as Jada reached for the hem of her blouse. "Tonight," she said, her voice steady as steel. "I'll be here with you, wearing nothing. If you don't touch me by morning, I'll marry you. If you do, we're done." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and heavy. Miles blinked, his mouth parting slightly, as if he wasn't sure he'd heard her right. For a man who'd built an empire out of quick decisions and smooth talk, he looked damn near speechless. Jada didn't flinch. She tugged the blouse over her head, letting it drop to the floor with a soft thud. The cool air brushed her skin, raising goosebumps on her rich brown arms as she stood there in her bra and jeans, daring him to say something. "Jada," Miles started, his voice low, almost a growl. He took a step forward, then caught himself, rooting his feet to the spot. "What the hell is this?" "This," she said, unbuttoning her jeans with deliberate slowness, "is me figuring out if you're for real. You've had 100 women, Miles. Models, actresses, heiresses, girls who'd trip over themselves to get in your bed. How do I know I'm not just another name on your list?" Her jeans slid down her legs, pooling around her ankles. She stepped out of them, kicking them aside, leaving her in nothing but a simple black bra and panties. The light from the city outside danced across her skin, highlighting the curve of her hips, the strength in her thighs. She wasn't built like the stick-thin girls Miles usually paraded around Buckhead hotspots. Jada was solid. Years of running track in high school and hauling groceries for her mama had made sure of that, and right now, she was using every ounce of that strength to stand tall, unflinching, under his gaze. Miles swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "You're different, Jada. I've never met anyone who sees right through me like you do. You think I'd risk everything I've built just for some fling?" She tilted her head, her dark eyes narrowing. "Words are cheap, Miles. You're good at 'em. Too good. I need more than sweet talk. I need to know you love me, not just the idea of me, not just this." She gestured to her body, her voice steady but laced with something raw. "I'm not some trophy for you to show off at your fancy galas." He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect style, and let out a shaky laugh. "You're killing me here, you know that? I've been chasing you for months, Jada, months, and now you pull this?" "Chasing's your thing," she shot back, unhooking her bra and letting it fall. "You love the hunt, always have. But what happens when you catch me? You gonna stick around, or you gonna move on to the next shiny thing?" Miles's breath hitched as she stepped out of her panties, leaving her bare in the middle of his penthouse. The air between them crackled, electric and dangerous. Her skin glowed under the dim lights, a deep, warm brown that seemed to soak up the city's shimmer and throw it back twice as fierce. She crossed her arms, not out of shyness, but to hold herself steady, her chin lifted high. "Jesus, Jada," he muttered, dragging a hand down his face. "You're not making this easy." "Good," she said, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "It's not supposed to be. If you can't handle this, you can't handle me." He stared at her, his eyes tracing every inch of her as if he were trying to memorize her right then and there. But he didn't move, didn't reach for her, didn't even twitch. Jada could see the war playing out behind those blue eyes. Want versus will. Instinct versus something deeper. She'd heard the stories about Miles Carter, the playboy who'd bedded half of Atlanta's elite, the guy who never stayed with anyone long enough to call it real. And yet here he was, rooted to the spot, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Where?" he finally asked, his voice rough, as if he'd been holding his breath too long. "Your bed," she said simply. "Where it'll be hardest." Miles let out a low curse under his breath, but he nodded, gesturing toward the hallway. "After you." She walked past him, her bare feet silent on the hardwood, feeling his eyes on her back like a physical touch. The penthouse was all sleek lines and modern edges, marble counters, leather furniture, a view that stretched from Midtown to the horizon. It screamed money, power, everything Jada had never had growing up in Shiloh. Back there, the tallest building was the old Baptist church with its peeling white paint, where her mama dragged her every Sunday to sing hymns and pray for a better life. Jada had clawed her way out of that small town through Harvard and into Carter Enterprises, a marketing gig she'd earned with grit and late nights. And then Miles had happened. It started simple enough. A chance meeting in the company elevator 6 months back, her juggling a stack of files, him in a suit that probably cost more than her rent. He'd flashed that $1 million smile and said, "New here?" She'd shot back, "Not new enough to fall for that line." He'd laughed, and somehow that laugh had stuck with her. From there, it was stolen glances in boardrooms, late-night chats over takeout in her cubicle, a slow burn that turned into something neither of them could ignore. But Jada wasn't naive. She'd seen the tabloids, heard the whispers from Selena, her co-worker and best friend. Miles Carter doesn't do serious. He does fun, then he's gone. They reached his bedroom, a massive space with a king-sized bed draped in crisp white sheets, a skyline view framing it like a damn postcard. Jada slid under the covers, the cool fabric brushing her skin as she settled on her side, facing away from him. Miles hesitated at the edge of the bed, then kicked off his shoes and peeled off his shirt, leaving his slacks on like some kind of armor. He lay down on top of the covers, maintaining a careful foot of space between them, his breathing uneven. "You sure about this?" he asked, staring up at the ceiling. "Dead sure," she replied, her voice muffled against the pillow. "Question is, are you?" He didn't answer, just let out a long, slow breath. The room fell quiet, save for the faint hum of the city outside and the ticking of a clock somewhere in the dark. Jada closed her eyes, trying to steady her own heartbeat. She wasn't just testing him. She was testing herself, too. Growing up black in a small southern town had taught her to guard her heart, to question every intention twice. Miles was a risk, a big one. A white guy with a silver spoon and a reputation longer than Peachtree Street. But damn if he didn't make her feel seen, really seen, in a way no one ever had. Minutes stretched into hours. She could feel him there, the heat of him radiating across that small gap, the tension coiling tighter with every tick of the clock. She wondered what he was thinking. Whether he was picturing all the women before her, the Kylies and the socialites, or if he was actually fighting for her, for them, for a future she barely let herself dream about. And then, just as the first hint of dawn crept through the blinds, it happened. Her leg shifted in her sleep, brushing against his. Miles flinched, his hand jerking toward her instinctively fingers grazing the curve of her hip before he yanked it back as if he'd been burned. Jada's eyes snapped open, her breath catching as she sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. "You touched me," she whispered, the words slicing through the silence. "Jada, it was an accident. I swear to God I didn't mean to." She shook her head, already sliding out of bed and grabbing her clothes from the floor. "Doesn't matter. I needed you to prove it, Miles, to choose me over yourself. And you couldn't." He reached for her, then stopped himself, his hand hovering in the air. "Please don't go. We can talk this out." "There's nothing to talk about," she said, pulling her blouse on with shaky hands. "I gave you a chance. You blew it." She dressed in silence, the weight of her words sinking in. Miles watched her, his face a mess of regret and something deeper, something that looked a hell of a lot like love. But Jada couldn't let herself see it, not now. She walked out of the bedroom, through the penthouse, and into the elevator, the doors sliding shut on his pleas. As the city woke up below her, she leaned against the wall, tears stinging her eyes, wondering if she'd just lost the one man who might have been worth the risk. "Hey, y'all. What do you think Miles will do next? Can he win Jada back after that slip-up? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts." The penthouse bedroom felt like a pressure cooker as the night dragged on. The massive windows let in slivers of moonlight, painting faint silver streaks across the hardwood floor and the crisp white sheets where Jada Brooks lay, bare as the day she was born. Her rich brown skin glowed softly in the dim light, a stark contrast to the sterile luxury of Miles Carter's world. She kept her eyes shut, her breathing slow and deliberate, but her mind was racing a mile a minute. Every tick of the clock on the nightstand sounded like a gunshot in the silence, counting down to dawn, and to whatever this night would mean for her and Miles. Miles lay next to her, flat on his back, staring up at the ceiling as if it held all the answers he didn't have. He'd left his slacks on, a thin shield against the temptation radiating from Jada's side of the bed. His chest rose and fell unevenly, bare skin prickling with sweat despite the cool air humming through the vents. The space between them, a measly foot of mattress, might as well have been a damn canyon. He clenched his fists at his sides, nails digging into his palms, fighting the urge to roll over and pull her close. She'd laid down the rules clear as day. No touching till morning, or they were done. And Miles Carter wasn't about to lose her over something as stupid as a reflex. "You still awake?" he whispered, his voice rough, cutting through the quiet like a blade. Jada didn't open her eyes, but her lips twitched. "Yeah. You?" "Barely," he muttered, shifting just enough to glance at her profile, her high cheekbones, the soft curve of her jaw, those curls spilling across the pillow like a crown. "This is torture. You know that, right?" "Good," she said, a hint of sass in her tone. "Builds character." He let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "You're something else, Jada Brooks." "That's why you're still here," she shot back, keeping her voice steady even as her heart thumped harder. She could feel him there, the heat of him, the pull of him, like a magnet she was trying damn hard not to get sucked into. Growing up in Shiloh, she'd learned early how to spot a smooth talker, guys who'd promise you the moon just to get what they wanted. Miles was different, sure, but he'd spent years playing that game with women who didn't look like her, didn't sound like her, didn't come from where she came from. She needed proof he wasn't just chasing the thrill of something new. The clock hit 2 a.m., then 3, while the city outside buzzed faintly, cars honking down on Peachtree, the distant wail of a siren. But up here, it was just them, and the tension coiling tighter with every passing minute. Jada's mind drifted back to how they'd gotten here. 6 months ago, she'd been the new girl at Carter Enterprises, hustling to prove she belonged in a glass tower full of suits who didn't look like her. Miles had been a surprise, A spark in the elevator that turned into late-night talks, shared coffees, a slow dance at some company gala where his hand on her waist felt too good to be safe. But every step closer came with a whisper in her head. He's done this before. You're not the first. Miles shifted again, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. You ever gonna tell me why this test matters so much? He asked, keeping his eyes on the ceiling. Jada cracked one eye open, staring at the shadows dancing across the wall. "'Cause I've seen what happens when folks like you get bored," she said quietly. "Back home, my cousin Tasha fell for a guy who swore he'd stick around. Took her to bed, made all the promises, then ghosted her when the shine wore off. Left her with a kid and a broke heart. I'm not about to be that girl, Miles." He turned his head to look at her, his blue eyes catching the moonlight. "I'm not that guy, Jada." "Prove it," she said, closing her eye again. "That's what tonight's for." He didn't argue, just let out a long, slow breath and went back to staring at the ceiling as the hours crawled by, each one heavier than the last. Jada's body ached from holding still, her muscles tense, but she wasn't about to give in. She pictured her mama, Lena, back in Shiloh, kneading dough for cornbread and telling her, "Baby girl, don't you ever settle for less than you're worth." This was her worth. Knowing Miles could love her for who she was, not just for her body, not just for the chase. Around 4 a.m., exhaustion started winning. Her breathing softened, and her body relaxed into the sheets as sleep crept up on her. Miles felt it too, his eyelids drooping, his fists unclenching. He murmured something under his breath, too low to catch, and let his head sink deeper into the pillow. The room grew hazy, the city lights blurring into a soft glow beyond the blinds. And then it happened. Jada shifted in her sleep, her legs sliding across the mattress, brushing against his. The contact jolted Miles awake, a shock of heat shooting through him. His hand moved before he could stop it, fingers grazing the smooth curve of her hip, lingering there for a split second before he yanked it back like he'd touched a live wire. But it was too late. Jada's eyes snapped open, her body going rigid as she sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. "You touched me," she whispered, her voice sharp with disbelief. Miles bolted upright, his heart slamming against his ribs. "Jada, it was an accident. I swear to God, I didn't mean to." "Doesn't matter." She cut him off, already swinging her legs off the bed. Her voice trembled, but her hands were steady as she grabbed her bra from the floor. "I told you the rules. I needed you to choose me over your instincts, Miles. And you couldn't." "Jada, please," he said, scrambling to his feet, his slacks wrinkled from the night. "It was a reflex. 5 damn hours I laid there, not moving an inch. Doesn't that count for something?" She pulled her blouse on, fingers fumbling with the buttons as she shook her head. "Almost isn't enough. Not when I'm putting my whole heart on the line." Her dark eyes met his, glistening with unshed tears. "I grew up fighting to be seen, Miles. Really seen. Not just as some pretty thing to play with till you're tired. I thought you got that." "I do get it," he said, stepping closer, his voice breaking. "I've been trying to show you, every day, every damn minute with you. One slip doesn't erase that." She paused, her jeans halfway up her thighs, and looked at him, really looked at him. His face was a mess of desperation, his hair sticking up in all directions, his hands hovering like he wanted to reach for her but didn't dare. For a second, she almost believed him. Almost. But then she remembered the stories. Selena's warnings, the tabloid headlines, the women who'd come before her. She couldn't risk it. Not yet. "I needed proof," she said softly, zipping her jeans and grabbing her shoes. "And you didn't give it to me." "Jada, don't go," he pleaded, following her as she headed for the bedroom door. "We can figure this out." Talk it through, anything you want." She stopped in the hallway, her back to him, the penthouse stretching out around her like a gilded cage. "There's nothing to talk about," she said, her voice cracking just enough to betray her. "I gave you a shot. You blew it." She didn't look back as she walked through the living room, past the leather couches and the million-dollar view, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. Miles stood frozen, watching her go, his chest tight with a pain he hadn't felt since he was a kid, begging his dad not to leave. The elevator dinged, and she stepped inside, her silhouette framed against the steel doors. As they slid shut, he caught a glimpse of her face. Those fierce brown eyes, wet with tears, her jaw set like she was holding herself together by sheer will. The penthouse fell silent, the hum of the city mocking him through the windows. Miles sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands, the scent of her still lingering in the air, something warm and earthy, like home. He'd failed her. One dumb, half-asleep mistake, and he'd lost the only woman who'd ever made him want to be better. But as the first streaks of dawn painted the skyline gold, a stubborn spark flickered in his chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Downstairs, Jada stepped out into the crisp Atlanta morning, the streets still quiet except for a lone jogger and the rumble of a delivery truck. She pulled her jacket tight around her, the chill biting at her skin as tears finally spilled down her cheeks. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably Selena, wondering why she wasn't at their usual coffee spot yet. But Jada didn't answer. She just kept walking, the weight of the night pressing down on her, wondering if she'd just thrown away the one thing she'd been too scared to admit she wanted. The Greyhound bus rumbled down I-20, its engine groaning as it cut through the Georgia countryside. Jada Brooks sat near the back, her forehead pressed against the cool window, watching the pines blur past in a green haze. Atlanta's skyscrapers were 2 hours behind her now, fading into memory along with Miles Carter's penthouse and that damn test she'd thrown at him. Her overnight bag sat heavy on her lap, stuffed with a change of clothes and a half-eaten bag of peanut M&Ms she'd grabbed at the station. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten much either, just kept replaying that moment when Miles's fingers brushed her hip, the look on his face when she walked out. Her chest ached like someone had punched a hole through it, but she wasn't about to let herself cry. Not here, not yet. Shiloh came into view as the sun climbed higher, a speck of a town nestled between rolling hills and red clay fields. The bus hissed to a stop at the corner of Main and Church Street, right in front of the old gas station with its rusty pumps. Jada stepped off, her sneakers kicking up dust, and took a deep breath. The air smelled like pine and fried chicken, a far cry from the exhaust and coffee of Midtown Atlanta. Home. She needed this. Her mama's cooking, her brother's dumb jokes, the quiet of a place where nobody cared about penthouses or billionaires. The Brooks house sat a half-mile down the road, a squat little ranch with peeling yellow paint and a porch sagging under the weight of too many summers. Jada pushed the screen door open, the familiar squeak greeting her like an old friend. "Mama?" she called, dropping her bag by the couch. "In here, baby girl." Lena Brooks' voice floated from the kitchen, warm and rough around the edges. Jada followed the sound and the smell of cornbread baking, finding her mama hunched over the stove, stirring a pot of collards. Lena was a short woman, sturdy as an oak, her dark skin lined with years of hard work as a nurse. She glanced up, her eyes narrowing as she took in Jada's slumped shoulders and the shadows under her eyes. "You look like hell," Lena said, wiping her hands on her apron. "What's wrong?" Jada sank into a chair at the scarred wooden table, running a hand through her curls. "It's a long story, Mama." "Got time," Lena said, sliding a plate of hot cornbread in front of her. "Eat something first. You're skinnier than a stray cat." Jada managed a small smile, breaking off a piece of the cornbread and popping it in her mouth. It melted on her tongue, buttery and sweet, tugging her back to Sunday dinners and simpler days. But the comfort didn't last. She swallowed hard, then let it spill out, the whole messy tale of Miles Carter, the elevator sparks, the late-night talks, and that crazy test she'd put him through. Lena listened, her face tightening as Jada got to the part about walking out at dawn. When she finished, Lena set her spoon down with a clatter, crossing her arms. That man's world ain't ours, Jada. Rich white boys like him, they don't stick around when the going gets tough. He'll break your heart and leave you with nothing but regrets. He's not like that, Jada said, though her voice wavered. Or, I thought he wasn't. You thought, Lena repeated, her tone sharp. Baby, I've seen too many girls like you fall for sweet words and big promises. You're too smart for that. You got out of Shiloh, went to Harvard, made something of yourself. Don't let some slick city boy drag you down. Before Jada could argue, the screen door banged open again, and Trey Brooks strode in, his work boots leaving dirt streaks on the linoleum. Her big brother was built like a linebacker, broad shoulders, dark skin gleaming with sweat from a day on the construction site. He grinned when he saw her, but it faded fast when he caught the tension in the room. What's going on? Trey asked, tossing his hard hat onto the counter. You in trouble, lil sis? Not trouble, Jada said, picking at her cornbread. Just figuring stuff out. She's tangled up with some rich white guy in Atlanta, Lena cut in, her voice dripping with disapproval. Thinks he's gonna marry her or some foolishness. Trey's eyebrows shot up, then his face hardened. The hell you say? Who's this dude? His name's Miles Carter, Jada said, bracing herself. He runs the company I work for. Trey let out a low whistle, leaning against the counter. Carter? Like Carter Enterprises Carter? That guy's loaded. And a player. I've seen his face in them magazines at the barber shop. What's he want with you? To love me, Jada snapped, then softened. Maybe. I don't know anymore. Trey crossed his arms, mirroring their mama's stance. He's just another rich white guy who thinks he can buy anything. Even you, Jada. You're too good for that. Tell him to kick rocks. Jada stared at the table, her throat tight. She wanted to defend Miles, to tell them about the way he'd look at her like she was the only person in the room, the way he'd stayed up late helping her tweak a presentation just because she asked. But after last night, those memories felt flimsy, like tissue paper in the rain. Back in Atlanta, Miles wasn't faring much better. He'd barely slept, pacing the penthouse till the sun came up, then dragged himself to the Carter Enterprises tower in Buckhead. The office buzzed around him, phones ringing, assistants scurrying, but he couldn't focus. His assistant, Tasha Grant, a sharp-eyed black woman who'd been with him for a decade, clocked his mood the second he walked in. You look like you got hit by a truck, Tasha said, handing him a coffee. What's eating you? Jada, he said, slumping into his chair. I screwed up, Tash. Big time. She raised an eyebrow, leaning against his desk. What did you do to that girl now? He told her everything. The test, the sleepless night, that dumb slip of his hand. Tasha listened, her face unreadable, then shook her head. You're an idiot, Miles. She gave you a shot to prove you're not the same fool you were 5 years ago, and you fumbled it. I know, he groaned, dragging a hand down his face. I don't know how to fix it. Figure it out, Tasha said, straightening up. She's worth it. Don't make me regret rooting for you. He nodded. But before he could say more, his office door swung open, and Vivian Carter swept in like a storm in Chanel. His mother was all sharp cheekbones and icy blonde hair, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She just launched right in. I heard you've been moping. Vivian said, her voice clipped. "And I've arranged a fix. Dinner tonight at the Capitol Grill. Kylie Monroe's in town, and she's dying to see you." Miles's stomach sank. Kylie, his ex, the supermodel with legs for days and a smile that could sell toothpaste to a shark. "Ma, I'm not in the mood." "Nonsense," Vivian said, waving a manicured hand. "You've been wasting time with that little marketing girl. What's her name, Jada? She's not one of us, Miles. Kylie fits our world. You need someone who understands your status." "She's not some marketing girl," Miles snapped, his temper flaring. "She's Jada Brooks, and she's smarter than half the people in this building, including me." Vivian's lips thinned, but she didn't back down. "You're a Carter. Act like it. 8 o'clock. Don't be late." She turned on her heel and left, leaving Miles staring at the door, his coffee growing cold in his hand. Tasha shot him a look. "You going?" "Hell no," he muttered, though the seed of doubt was there. His mom had a way of getting under his skin, reminding him of the life he'd lived before Jada, the parties, the women, the emptiness. Was he kidding himself, thinking he could change? That night, while Jada sat on her mama's porch in Shiloh, the crickets chirping around her, Miles found himself at the Capitol Grill against his better judgment. The place screamed money. Dim lights, mahogany walls, waiters in crisp white shirts. Kylie Monroe slid into the seat across from him, her blonde hair cascading over one shoulder, her green eyes glinting with something predatory. "Missed you, babe," she purred, leaning in close enough for him to smell her perfume. Something floral and overpriced. "Heard you've been slumming it with some girl from nowhere. What's that about?" Miles gripped his whiskey glass, his jaw tight. "Her name's Jada, and she's not some girl. Lay off, Kylie." She laughed, a sharp, tinkling sound that grated on his nerves. "Oh, come on, Miles. You don't do serious. You do fun." "And I'm fun." She brushed her fingers along his arm, her nails grazing his skin. He pulled away, standing abruptly. "Not tonight. Not ever again." He tossed a few bills on the table and walked out, leaving Kylie gaping after him. The Atlanta night hit him hard, humid air, neon lights, the pulse of a city that never slept. He didn't want Kylie. He didn't want that life. He wanted Jada, her fire, her laugh, the way she'd call him out and make him better. But as he climbed into his car, the weight of his failure pressed down harder. She was gone, back to Shiloh, and he didn't know if she'd ever let him close again. Back in Shiloh, Jada stared up at the stars, her mama's words echoing in her head. "That man's world ain't ours." Maybe Lena was right. Maybe Trey was too. But as a tear slipped down her cheek, she couldn't shake the memory of Miles's voice, begging her to stay. Was she running from a mistake, or from the one guy who might actually be worth the fight? The Atlanta skyline shimmered through a late afternoon haze, but up in Miles Carter's penthouse, the air felt stale, heavy with the silence Jada Brooks had left behind. It had been 3 days since she'd walked out, 3 days since he'd felt her slip through his fingers like sand. Miles stood by the window, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the city he'd conquered. Carter Enterprises tower gleaming in the distance, a testament to everything he'd built. But it didn't mean a damn thing without her. He hadn't slept right since that night, the memory of her bare skin under the moonlight haunting him, her words cutting deeper than any business deal gone south. "I needed proof, and you didn't give it to me." He set the glass down hard on the counter, the clink echoing in the empty space. Enough wallowing. Jada wasn't some deal he could close with a handshake and a smile. She was worth more than that, worth fighting for. And if she wouldn't listen to his words, he'd damn well show her with actions. He grabbed a notepad from his desk, the kind he used for brainstorming mergers, and started scribbling, not a pitch, not a plea, just the truth, raw and messy, the way she'd always seen right through him. The first letter was simple, written in his scratchy handwriting. Jada, I messed up. Not just the test, but years before I met you. I grew up thinking love was a game. Win it, enjoy it, move on. You showed me it's deeper than that, and I'm still learning how to live up to it. I don't expect you to forgive me yet. Just know I'm not giving up. He folded it, stuffed it in an envelope, and drove to her midtown apartment himself. No driver, no assistant. The doorman, a grizzled old guy named Earl, raised an eyebrow but took the letter with a grunt. She ain't been around much, Earl said. Heard she's out of town. I know, Miles said, shoving his hands in his pockets. Just make sure she gets it when she's back. Back in Shiloh, Jada was trying to outrun her thoughts. She'd spent the morning helping her mama, Lena, weed the garden behind the house, the red Georgia dirt staining her knees as she yanked at stubborn roots. The sun beat down, sweat beading on her dark skin, but the work felt good, kept her hands busy, her mind off Miles. Trey had dragged her to the diner on Main Street for lunch, where the waitress, Miss Ruby, slid a plate of fried catfish in front of her with a wink. You look like you need some comfort food, sugar. More like a new brain, Jada muttered, picking at the crispy edges. One that doesn't keep replaying dumb decisions. Trey snorted, leaning back in the booth, his construction vest still dusted with sawdust. That Carter guy still got you twisted up? Told you, sis. He's trouble. Rich folks like him don't change. Maybe, she said, her voice quiet. But he's trying. I just don't know if it's enough. She didn't tell Trey about the ache in her chest, the way she'd catch herself wondering what Miles was doing, whether he'd gone back to his old ways with girls like Kylie Monroe. She'd come home to clear her head, but Shiloh wasn't letting her off easy. Every corner held a memory, her running barefoot down Church Street, her mama braiding her hair on the porch, her daddy's voice singing gospel till cancer took him when she was 12. This was her anchor, her roots. Could Miles ever fit into that? Miles, meanwhile, was finding ways to prove he could. He'd started showing up at a community center in West End, a mostly black neighborhood on Atlanta's South Side. It wasn't a PR stunt, no cameras, no press releases, just him in jeans and a faded t-shirt, helping fix leaky roofs and paint-peeling walls. The director, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Clara, had squinted at him the first day like he was a lost tourist. You sure you know how to use a hammer, rich boy? She'd asked, handing him a toolbox. Learned from my granddad, Miles said, grinning. He'd tan my hide if I didn't. Miss Clara huffed, but let him stay. He worked till his hands blistered, hauling lumber and joking with the kids who hung around after school. It wasn't about Jada, not directly. It was about him figuring out who he could be, the man she'd seen glimpses of beneath the suits and the swagger. But damn if he didn't hope she'd hear about it somehow. Every morning, he wrote another letter. Day 2. I went to a meeting today and listened more than I talked. Used to think winning meant dominating the room. You taught me it's about understanding, not just overpowering. Still sucks at it, but I'm trying. Day 3. My dad raised me to see women as accessories, pretty things to show off. I hate that I bought into it for so long. You're not that, Jada. Never will be. He dropped them off with Earl, one by one, a quiet campaign to show her he meant it. A week after she'd left, Jada came back to Atlanta. Shiloh had grounded her, but it couldn't fix the hole Miles had left. She stepped into her midtown apartment, a cozy one-bedroom with thrift store furniture and a view of the MARTA tracks, and found a stack of envelopes waiting on the kitchen counter. Earl had scrawled a note. Your boyfriend's persistent. Good luck. Her heart skipped, but she didn't open them right away. Instead, she called Selena Ortiz, her best friend from Carter Enterprises, who showed up 20 minutes later with a bottle of cheap rosé and a grin. Spill it, Selena said, plopping onto the couch, her dark hair spilling over her shoulders. You've been MIA, and I need the tea. Jada sighed, pouring them both a glass. Miles failed the test. I walked out. Went home to Shiloh to figure my shit out, but I don't know, Sel. I miss him. Selena's eyes widened. Wait. Rewind. What test? Jada told her everything, from the penthouse showdown to the bus ride home. Selena whistled low, shaking her head. Girl, you're wild. But I get it. Miles has a rap sheet longer than my abuela's grocery list. You sure he's worth all this? That's the problem, Jada said, swirling her wine. I'm not. She reached for the letters, her fingers trembling as she tore open the first one. Miles's messy scrawl spilled across the page, each word hitting her like a punch. She read them all, one after another, her throat tightening with every line. Selena watched, sipping her rosé, her usual sass quiet for once. He's trying, Jada said finally, setting the last letter down. But is it enough? Only you can answer that, Selena said, leaning forward. But I'll say this. Nobody's perfect. Not even you, Miss Harvard. Jada laughed. A small, shaky sound, but it faded fast. She didn't know what to do with the letters, with the hope they stirred up. She needed space, time, something to prove this wasn't just Miles playing a new game. The next day, she was walking through West End, picking up groceries at the little market her co-worker Tasha had raved about. The streets were alive. Kids on bikes, old men playing chess outside the barber shop, gospel music drifting from a cracked window. She turned a corner and froze. There, across the street at the community center, was Miles. He was up on a ladder, a paint roller in his hand, white streaks smudged across his t-shirt and jeans, while a group of boys laughed below him, tossing a basketball back and forth as he called down some half-assed trash talk. Jada's breath caught. He didn't see her. He was too busy balancing the ladder and dodging a kid's playful jab. But she saw him. Not the slick CEO in a corner office, not the playboy from the tabloids, but a guy who looked real. Paint flecked his dark hair, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, his laugh echoing across the lot. She ducked behind a parked car before he could spot her, her heart hammering. Back at her apartment that night, she sat at her rickety kitchen table, the letters spread out in front of her. The lamp cast a warm glow over the pages as her fingers traced his words. You taught me it's about understanding, not overpowering. She thought about him at the center, the way he'd fit in. Not perfectly, but genuinely. A tear slipped down her cheek, splattering on the paper, and she didn't wipe it away. Selena's voice echoed in her head. Nobody's perfect. Neither was she. She'd set that test to protect herself, but maybe she'd made it too hard, too absolute. Miles wasn't perfect, but he was trying, harder than anyone ever had for her. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over his number, then set it down again. Not yet. She needed more. Something bigger than letters, bigger than paint on his shirt. But for the first time since she'd walked out, a flicker of hope burned in her chest, small but stubborn, refusing to die. Rain streaked down the windows of Jada Brooks's midtown apartment, a steady patter that matched the restless thud of her heart. It had been 10 days since she'd walked out of Miles Carter's penthouse, a week since she'd seen him painting that community center in West End, his laugh cutting through her defenses like a knife. Those letters he'd sent, stacked on her kitchen table, ink smudged from her tears, had chipped away at her resolve. She'd spent nights pacing her tiny living room, the MARTA trains rumbling past outside, wrestling with the same damn question. Was he for real? Tonight, she was about to find out. She stood in front of her mirror, smoothing her curls with shaky hands. No fancy penthouse this time. She'd texted Miles to come here, to her world, a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a couch she'd scored at Goodwill. The stakes were higher now, the test sharper. She slipped out of her jeans and t-shirt, letting them fall to the hardwood, her bare skin prickling in the cool air. Her reflection stared back, dark eyes fierce with determination, her rich brown curves unapologetic under the soft glow of a thrift store lamp. She wasn't doing this to tease him. She was doing it to know, once and for all, if he could love her beyond the physical, beyond the chase. The doorbell buzzed, sharp and insistent. Jada took a deep breath, wrapped a robe around herself, and padded to the door. Miles stood there, rain dripping from his dark hair, his jacket clinging to his broad shoulders, his blue eyes locked on hers, a mix of hope and nerves flickering in them. He looked less like the slick CEO and more like a guy who'd been running on fumes, chasing something he couldn't quite catch. "Hey," he said, his voice rough. "You sure about this?" "Yeah," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Same rules. I'll be with you tonight. Nothing on." "You don't touch me till morning, Miles. That's the deal." He nodded, swallowing hard as he shrugged off his jacket and hung it on the rickety coat rack by the door. "I won't let you down this time." She didn't reply, just untied her robe and let it slip to the floor, standing there bare in her own space, a space that smelled like coffee and the lavender candles Selena had gifted her last Christmas. Miles's breath hitched, but he didn't move, didn't even blink, just kept his eyes on her face like he was afraid to look anywhere else. Jada turned and walked to her bedroom, the old floor creaking under her feet, knowing he'd follow. Her bed wasn't king-sized like his, just a full, with a quilt her mama had stitched years ago, faded blue and yellow patches worn soft from time. She slid under it, the fabric cool against her skin, and Miles kicked off his shoes, peeling off his soaked shirt, but keeping his jeans on. He lay down beside her, on top of the quilt, that same careful foot of space between them, as the rain drummed harder outside, a steady rhythm that filled the silence. "You don't have to do this," he said after a while, his voice low. "I've been showing you, Jada, every day since you left." "I know," she said, staring at the ceiling, the glow of a streetlight filtering through the blinds. "But I need this. For me. To be sure." He didn't argue, just let out a slow breath and stayed still. The hours ticked by, the tension thick enough to choke on, as Jada could hear his uneven, strained breathing and feel the heat of him across that small gap. She thought about Shiloh, her mama's warnings, Trey's scowl, and then about Miles's letters, the paint on his hands, the way he'd turned down Kylie at that fancy restaurant. Her heart wanted to believe him, but her head wasn't ready to let go. Around midnight, her phone buzzed on the nightstand, slicing through the quiet. She reached for it, frowning at the screen. Selena, texting in all caps. "Check the news, now." Jada sat up, the quilt pooling around her waist, and opened her browser. The headline hit her like a slap. Carter Enterprises accused of racial bias in hiring. Lawsuit looms. Her stomach dropped as she skimmed the article. Anonymous sources claiming the company favored white hires, sidelining Black and Latino candidates like her, and then, buried in the third paragraph, a dagger. Insiders suggest Jada Brooks, a Black junior exec, slept her way into her role. "What the hell?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Miles sat up too, leaning over her shoulder. "What's wrong?" She shoved the phone at him, her hands trembling with rage. Your company's a damn mess, and now they're dragging my name through the mud." He scanned the screen, his face paling. "Jada, I swear I didn't know about this." "Doesn't matter," she snapped, swinging her legs off the bed. I've been busting my ass to prove I belong there, and now they're saying I'm just your side piece? I can't do this, Miles." "Hold up," he said, grabbing her arm, then letting go fast when she glared at him. "This isn't true. None of it. I'll fix it." "How?" she shot back, pulling the quilt around her like armor. "Your whole damn empire's built on people like me getting screwed over. And now Kylie's out there. I'd bet my last dollar she's behind this, making me look like some gold-digging stereotype." Miles's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing. If she did this, she's done. But Jada, you gotta believe me. I'd never let this stand. She stared at him, her chest heaving, torn between the hurt and the flicker of trust she'd been nursing. "Prove it," she said finally. "Not just tonight, tomorrow. At work. If you can't respect me there, I can't trust you here." He nodded, his voice steady. "I will, I swear." She lay back down, the phone still clutched in her hand, the rain a dull roar outside. The rest of the night stretched out, tense and restless. Miles didn't move, didn't speak, just stayed there, his breathing a quiet anchor in the storm. Jada's mind raced. Anger at the article, fear for her career, doubt about him. But she held still, waiting for dawn. When the first gray light crept through the blinds, she turned to him. He was awake, watching her, his face drawn but calm. "You didn't touch me," she said softly. "No," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Not a damn finger." She nodded, a weight lifting off her chest, but it wasn't over. "Good. Now fix the rest." He got up, pulling his shirt back on, and headed for the door. "I'll see you at the office. We're handling this, together." Jada stayed in bed as he left, the rain slowing to a drizzle outside. She'd given him a second chance, and he'd passed the test. But the real fight was just starting. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call from Selena. She answered, her voice hoarse. "You see it?" Selena asked, her tone tight. "Yeah," Jada said, rubbing her eyes. "It's bad." "Worse," Selena said. "Kylie's on Twitter, hinting she's got proof you and Miles rigged your promotion. People are eating it up." Jada's stomach twisted, a cold fury settling in her bones. She'd fought too hard, through Shiloh's dirt roads, Harvard's lecture halls, Carter Enterprises' glass ceilings, to let some jealous ex tear her down. And Miles? He'd passed her test, sure, but this was bigger. If he couldn't stand up for her now, in front of his company, his world, then all the letters and late-night promises meant nothing. She got up, pulling on a robe, and stared out at the wet Atlanta streets. The city looked gray and mean, like it was daring her to break. But Jada Brooks didn't break easy. She'd survived worse than this. Whispers in Shiloh about that smart black girl who'd never amount to much, sneers in college from kids who thought she was a diversity quota. She'd built her life brick by brick, and no tabloid lie was going to knock it down. Miles, though, he was the wild card. She'd seen the man he could be, paint-streaked and laughing in West End. But could he be that man here, where it mattered most? Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Selena. "Board's meeting at 9. You in?" Jada typed back a quick, "Hell yes," then headed for the shower. She had a fight to win, and Miles better be ready to back her up or get the hell out of her way. Across town, Miles sped toward Carter Enterprises, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The article burned in his mind, Kylie's name a red flag waving in the chaos. He'd built this company from nothing, but he'd been blind, too busy chasing profits to see the cracks. Jada was right. If he couldn't fix this, couldn't protect her, he didn't deserve her. As the tower loomed ahead, he made a call to Tasha, his assistant. "Get the board together," he said, his voice hard, "and find out who leaked this. We're ending it today." Tasha's voice crackled back, steady as ever. Already on it, boss. You better bring your A-game. Jada's gonna need it. I will, he said, pulling into the garage. For her. The Carter Enterprises boardroom buzzed with tension, a hive of suits and stern faces under harsh fluorescent lights. Jada Brooks stood at the head of the long mahogany table, her dark eyes blazing, her navy blazer sharp against her brown skin. Papers were strewn in front of her. Charts, emails, the damn lawsuit allegations that had turned her life upside down overnight. The room smelled like coffee and stress, the Atlanta skyline a gray blur through the windows as rain tapped a restless beat. She'd walked in at 9 a.m., chin high, ready to fight, but the whispers followed her like shadows. She slept her way up. Token hire. Carter's girl. Miles Carter stood beside her, his tie loosened, his jaw tight. He'd called this emergency meeting, but Jada had taken the reins, her voice steady as she laid out the truth. These claims are bullshit, she said, slapping a stack of HR records onto the table. I've got the stats, hiring data from the last 5 years. Yeah, we've got gaps and we're fixing them. But me, I earned this job. Every late night, every campaign, every damn win. You want to talk bias? Look at who's spreading these lies. The board shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting to Miles. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs. She's right. And I'll tell you who's behind it. Kylie Monroe. My ex. She's got no proof, just spite. I've already got legal on her ass for defamation. But this stops now. Jada's not just some exec. She's the best we've got. Anyone who thinks otherwise can walk out that door. A hush fell, thick and heavy. Then Tasha Grant, his assistant, piped up from the corner in a dry tone. I've been here 10 years. Jada's the real deal. Y'all know it. The room thawed, nods rippling through the suits. But Jada wasn't done. I'm leading the response, she said, locking eyes with Miles. Public statement, diversity audit, the works. You back me on this, or I'm gone. I'm with you, he said without hesitation. All the way. By noon, the board approved her plan, and Miles called a press conference for that afternoon. The tower's lobby swarmed with reporters, cameras flashing as he took the podium, Jada at his side. He didn't mince words. Carter Enterprises screwed up. We've got work to do on hiring, and we're doing it. But Jada Brooks, she's here because she's damn good, not because of me. Anyone saying otherwise, like Kylie Monroe, is lying. We've got the receipts, and we're coming for 'em. Jada stepped up next, her voice clear over the mic. I'm not a token or a scandal. I'm a black woman who fought for this, and I'm staying. We're fixing this company. Together, the crowd murmured, some clapping, others scribbling notes. Selena Ortiz, watching from the back, shot Jada a grin and a thumbs up. Miles caught her eye as they stepped off, a quiet pride in his gaze. You were badass up there, he said. Had to be, she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. You did all right, too. But the real surprise came later. That night, back at her apartment, Miles knocked on her door, a nervous energy buzzing around him. She let him in, still riding the high of the day, and he didn't waste time. I've been thinking, he said, pacing her tiny living room. This whole mess. Kylie, the company, us. It's got me twisted up. I don't want to lose you, Jada. Not ever. So I'm doing something crazy. He stopped, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket and dropping to one knee. Inside was a ring, an emerald set in platinum, simple but stunning. This was my grandma's, he said, his voice rough. She married for love, not money. Jada Brooks, will you marry me? Her breath caught, her heart slamming against her ribs. She stared at him, rain-streaked hair, blue eyes wide with hope, and saw the man he'd become, not the playboy he'd been. Miles, She started, then stopped, her mind racing. This is fast. I know, he said, standing but not stepping closer. But I've never been surer of anything. You've changed me, Jada. I'll spend my life proving it, day by day, if you'll let me. She looked at the ring, then at him, and something clicked. Yes, she said, her voice soft but firm. Yes, Miles Carter, I'll marry you. He grinned, slipping the ring onto her finger, and pulled her into a kiss, deep, fierce, full of everything they'd fought through. But Jada pulled back, a glint in her eye. One condition. We're doing it my way. Small, back home in Shiloh. No fancy buckhead bullshit. Deal, he laughed, kissing her again. Shiloh it is. A week later, they rolled into Shiloh in Miles's beat-up old Jeep. No limo, no flash. The Brooks house buzzed with prep. Lena in the kitchen frying chicken, Trey hauling chairs into the backyard, neighbors pitching in with cobbler and sweet tea. Jada wore a simple white dress, her curls loose and wild, the emerald ring catching the Georgia sun. Miles rocked a linen shirt and slacks, his usual polish traded for something real. The backyard was a patchwork of folding tables and wildflowers, the old oak tree strung with twinkle lights. The Shiloh Baptist choir hummed a gospel tune as Jada walked out, her arm looped through Trey's. He'd grumbled at first, "Still don't trust him, sis," but softened when he saw her smile. Lena watched from the porch, her eyes misty but wary, until Miles stepped up during the vows. "I've got something to say," he said, turning to Lena mid-ceremony, as the small crowd hushed. He knelt in front of her, his voice steady. "Mrs. Brooks, I know I'm not what you pictured for Jada. I've got a past, and I don't deserve her. But I'm asking your blessing, not just to marry her, but to be part of this family. I'll spend my life making her happy, ma'am. I swear it." Lena stared at him, her lips tight, then softened. "You better mean that, boy. Get up here and marry my girl." The crowd chuckled, and Jada's eyes welled up as Miles stood, taking her hands. The preacher kept it short. Vows, rings, a kiss that felt like coming home. 50 folks clapped and hollered, kids chasing fireflies as dusk fell. Lena pulled Miles aside after, pressing a plate of chicken into his hands. "You're all right, Carter. Don't mess this up." "I won't," he promised, grinning as Jada tugged him to dance under the oak, barefoot in the grass. That night, back in Atlanta, they curled up in her apartment. No penthouse, just them. Jada traced the ring on her finger, her head on his chest, the city humming outside. "I thought love had to be perfect," she said softly. "You taught me it's about growing together, mess and all." "And you taught me it's worth fighting for," Miles replied, his voice low. "Every damn day." She smiled, closing her eyes as his heartbeat thumped under her ear. They weren't perfect, never would be, never would. She'd keep her job, her name, her roots. He'd keep learning how to be the man she needed, not the one he'd been. The company still had cracks to mend. Kylie's lies still stung, but they'd face it together. Jada thought back to Shiloh, her mama's kitchen, Trey's laugh, the choir's harmony, and then to Miles, paint-streaked in West End, kneeling in her backyard. Love wasn't a test you passed once and done. It was a choice, every day, to show up, to grow, to stay. Miles kissed her forehead, his breath warm against her skin. "Good night, wife," he murmured, the word new and sweet. "Good night, husband," she whispered back, a grin tugging at her lips. "First of many." As sleep took them, the rain stopped, leaving Atlanta quiet under a starlit sky. They'd built something real, not a fairy tale, but a life. A black girl from Shiloh and a reformed playboy from Buckhead, proving that love, when it's true, doesn't just survive the storm, it thrives in it. What a ride! What's your favorite moment from Jada and Miles's story? Her badass press conference or that sweet Shiloh wedding? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Let's keep the love alive, y'all.